Well, hello there everybody, and welcome to the last video pretty much for the Red Shadow's favorite game series. And I'm starting over here by my computer desk because this happens to do with Final Fantasy VII. That's my all-time favorite game, like ever. But we'll also be covering a lot of the Final Fantasy series, so I wanted to show off these silly little statue type things or little figurines that I got on eBay a couple years ago. Of course, there's Cloud, there's Squall. Am I getting his name right? He's from 8. I'm not even sure on this guy. I think he's from 12 or something like that. There's Zidane, is that his name? No, that's that guy. This is Tidus from 10. This is Zidane. Oh, well, you'll have to pardon me on some of these other Final Fantasy games because I haven't played all of them. They're almost all cool, but of course everything comes down to number 7. So, let's do awkward transition here and move ourselves around to the normal place where we would be at, right here. And let's get down to it, shall we? Final Fantasy VII. I don't even know where to begin, so we'll put that off for now. Of course, we're going to go through the collection, and I'm going to show you what I have in terms of Final Fantasy games in general. May just take one whole video to show off everything that I have, and then take a second video for me to talk more about Final Fantasy VII and maybe some thoughts about the other games. So, let's just jump right on in. There it is, Final Fantasy VII. I'm ever so happy that I have a black label copy. This is not, sadly, my original copy of the game. Even this game, even though I knew back then it was my favorite game of all time, it still fell by the wayside when I got rid of my PS1 in the early 2000s in order to get a PlayStation 2. How dumb, naive, idiotic, moronic could I have been to get rid of my favorite game? But like I said, I managed to get myself a nice black label copy recently, a couple years ago I guess it was. Whoa, don't fall out, book. Disc number 1, there's the manual. Go to the back and you find discs 2 and 3. It's all in really good shape. Other than the case maybe being a little scratched and faded, this is about as good as it gets. So let's churn on through the series itself. This is my copy of Final Fantasy VIII. This is a greatest hits copy. I'm not so bummed out about that. I bought this one alongside number 9 on eBay a couple years ago for what I thought was a pretty good deal. Sadly, even though they packaged it, in my opinion, pretty well in a bubble mailer, it got damaged in the mail. I'm not sure how well you're going to see it there. There's a crack there, there's a crack there, there's a big crack down there. Crack up here by Seifer, I think his name is, by his face. But as far as the insides are concerned, everything was good. Discs were not hurt, although here's some more damage. If you can tell it there, like this whole entire interior piece of plastic came out. But the discs were perfect. So I guess it would just be a matter of tracking down one of those sellers that sells this style case and I could get it replaced. And here's number 9, also the greatest hits copy, not a big deal, wasn't too concerned. Disc 1 and booklet. Disc 3 and 4, because apparently disc number 2 is underneath the booklet. So there's that. Now these may not necessarily be in order of chronological release. I put them in an order that I just kind of felt best in going through here. So the next one up here is the Final Fantasy Anthology, also a greatest hits. These may have not been released as a black label. I don't remember. There was a game or a game series where they released them greatest hits and there was no other way to get them. But anyway, this is Final Fantasy 5 and 6. 5 I've dabbled a little bit with. It was fine. 6, it's pretty awesome. I can understand why a lot of people consider 6 to be the best. That was also released in the US on the Super Nintendo as Final Fantasy III, if you're not familiar with that fact. But Final Fantasy VI in Japan, 3 officially over here. Like I said, I can see why it was considered by a lot of people to be one of the best or the best in the series. It doesn't topple 7 for me, but I'll talk about that a little bit more. One of the reasons why. So anyway, there's Anthology. I guess I could open it up and show it off. Number 5, there's your booklet. And then there's number 6. And then next would be Final Fantasy Chronicles, which says right on the front, unlike the other one, what's in this, Final Fantasy IV and Chrono Trigger. This one was a no-brainer for me, and I'll talk a little bit more about Chrono Trigger and how that affects my feelings on 6 and 7 and all that. But this has 4 and Chrono Trigger, which 4 was previously released in the US as Final Fantasy II. So we got Final Fantasy 2 and 3, but they were actually Final Fantasies 4 and 6. I don't know the exact reasoning behind that, although I have heard that some people said Square and just the Japanese gaming industry in general didn't think that we were smart enough or good enough to play these games. They thought they were too tough for us. Now, they're too tough for a guy like me, no doubt, but as far as the gaming audience in general is concerned, I think we all discover that there were a lot of people who could handle these games just fine. Alright, the next one that I have in my collection, and it's unopened. I've never even did anything with this one, but that's Final Fantasy Origins. This has Final Fantasies 1 and 2, like the 2 original games. I bought it because it was relatively cheap, and I thought one of these days I'd give them a try. That days hasn't came yet. These were one Final Fantasy, the original game, was released here as Final Fantasy 1. 2 was never released here, I think, before this. I think since then, I don't have like the DS games and Game Boy games that were released. There were a lot of re-releases of these Final Fantasy games for handhelds. But I wanted this one because it would be playable for PlayStation. And the last thing in this PlayStation stack, PlayStation 1 stack anyway, is Final Fantasy Tactics. I have a copy here that, aside from the manual, is in very good shape. The disc is perfect, the back piece is perfect, but this manual has got stains on it, and it's just a little browned. I don't know if that's just, well, I don't know, I want to speculate as to what all that is. But Tactics, I owned this once back when it first came out, and it befuddled me. I just mentioned a few minutes ago that I'm not all that great with these games. Tactics is just too much strategy for me, but I really love having the game in my collection, as it is recognized as being a really good title. Alright, so I'm going to show off a couple things here. Well, not show off so much, it's just I'm going to show some more Final Fantasy games, but we're going to jump over to the GameCube really quick. This is Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. When I got my Wii that was backwards compatible with GameCube games, I sought out the Final Fantasy games that they had on their Crystal Chronicles. Picked up the first one, wasn't all that expensive. Never have tried it though. I don't know how these rate next to the main line of Final Fantasy games, but I just figure if it's fun and has some interesting characters, I'm absolutely down with that. Now, this is a little bit of a break from the regular Series 2, but this was a part of, I can't remember what it's called now. There was a name for all of these games that came out that referenced Final Fantasy VII, but this is Dirge of Cerberus. I hope that's the correct pronunciation of that. Dirge of Cerberus, Final Fantasy VII. Not necessarily a sequel, but it's a story that involves Vincent Valentine, who actually, all things told, is my favorite character from Final Fantasy VII. You know, some of the main characters like Cloud and Aerith or Eris. You be the judge. I think I've said both of them over the years. For right now, I'm going to just go with Aerith, the TH version. But Cloud and Aerith obviously are amazing, but as just an individualized character, I found Vincent Valentine to be the coolest looking, the coolest backstory, the coolest demeanor. He's just, guy is like badass, silent but deadly kind of badass. So to get a game to play as him was awesome, although the game itself was kind of meh. I've never beat it, but I did play a little bit of it when I first picked it up. So now we'll go back into the main series. The last main numbered game we looked at was Final Fantasy IX. So then there's Final Fantasy X. A game that was amongst my first purchases for the PS2 when I bought it. And I played it, first of all, visually stunning. It was amazing to actually hear voices from the characters in this game. But I didn't get very far in it. In fact, if you've played this game, and you probably know what I'm talking about, but you start out like in their world on the beach or whatever, and I think you get exposed to, what is it, Blitzball? And I think that was about as far as I got, was like the first exposure to learning about Blitzball. I don't think my characters left this beginning area, if that's what that is. It was alright, but it just wasn't grabbing me the way those PS1 games had. Then, for the first time ever in the series, they released a Final Fantasy game that actually was a sequel / was tied to a previous game in the series. Because all these games, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, none of them had really anything to do with the game prior to it. But this was an actual direct sequel that focused on these three ladies here. All I remember about it in the commercials was singing and dancing and gunplay and all kinds of stuff. Don't know when I'll get around to playing it. Obviously, I want to beat 10 before I would touch that, but I don't know. It's different. So, I've got no Final Fantasy XI in my collection. Final Fantasy XI was an MMORPG for the PS2 and PC, perhaps, and then I think it even ended up on the 360, but I've never dabbled in any of it because of the fact that it was an online game and I just didn't want to deal with all of that. That was way before World of Warcraft had taken over my life for a while. But anyway, I have Final Fantasy XII. I had started to play this game a couple years back. I stopped after a little while, because a lot of these games, and I'll even admit it with Final Fantasy VII, even though I was sucked in from the very get-go, for most people in these games, you have to get a few hours into the game before they really start to show their potential. I didn't make it that far into this one, so I'll give it another try someday. But it was just very militaristic, and I think that might have put me off it a little bit. Alright, now we're going to jump over to the 360 and Final Fantasy XIII. A game you can almost call still the current Final Fantasy, even though 14 is an online one that's that's currently in existence and going. But they just released the third and final part of that. I'm jumping ahead already, but this is still kind of a current game. This is heavy, so I'm guessing it's just the booklet inside is big. I have played a little bit of this. Visually, once again, the step up to the newer console showed off the graphical abilities of the makers of this game. It's very beautiful, but it just wasn't catching me so far. A few hours into it, of course. Needs more time, I'm sure, but it just hadn't really grabbed me quite yet. So then, as I mentioned, this is a three-parter, so here's Final Fantasy XIII-2. This is a special edition that I bought on eBay, but it comes with Episode 1 novella included inside the packaging. There's a book there. This is unopened. This, I think, was a Best Buy exclusive. I couldn't get much information on it, but because of the price, I picked this one up. Now, I don't have 13 3. Well, it's not called that. It's called Lightning Returns Final Fantasy 13. I don't have that one yet. I'll wait until it's cheap because I haven't touched, you know, the majority of games 1 and 2 yet. And that'll bring me to the last, essentially the last game in my collection, and that is the remaster of X and X2 for the PlayStation 3. I had the limited edition. There was, I think, a collector's edition or something that had a lot more goodies. But this one has an art book packaging. It's a 24-page artwork book and a foreword by Yoshinori Kitase, the game's original producer. I really just got it because I knew it was going to look really, really nice. Remembering what 10 looked like when I played it, this was going to be pretty amazing, and this might be a relatively short supply game. So I just wanted to have it for that reason. Collector's purposes, I guess, for the most part. Okay, let's jump over here to the strategy guides before I touch this other little pile of oddities. I'll start with these 3 books here. These are just kind of random strategy guides that I have. But this is the strategy guide for Final Fantasy 3, which I'm guessing means it's the strategy guide for Final... Yeah, I see the characters Terra, Kefka, yada yada yada. So this is the strategy guide for Final Fantasy VI, although because this is a book that was released, don't know, can't see, 1994. Since this was released in 1994, it's listed as Final Fantasy 3, but it's just kind of a cool thing to have the book for 6 in my collection. Then I have the strategy guide for Dissidia Final Fantasy. This was a PlayStation Portable game, and I do believe it was a fighting game. Yeah, it's a fighting game. Because it's a PSP game, it's a game I will more than likely never have, or even if I were to buy it, it'd be a game I would never really get to play. But it was pretty cool that it has so many characters from all the different Final Fantasies in it. You can see them depicted there, including good old Cloud. And then I have the strategy guide for Dirge of Cerberus, Final Fantasy VII. Just, you know, I had to have this. Anything Final Fantasy VII related has got to be in my collection. Alright, so now we'll get into the rest of the strategy guides, and then we can wrap this first video up. So for me, it starts with Final Fantasy VII guides. This is my official Squaresoft strategy guide. I have to remember whether or not this was still during the days that they were Squaresoft, before they merged with Enix. I think Enix wasn't the full name of it, but anyway, they became Square Enix. So there's the official strategy guide for Final Fantasy VII. This is my holy grail of almost my entire Final Fantasy VII collection. Pretty much even more so than the game itself. This one is a pretty penny to find on eBay, and that's the Versus book Final Fantasy VII strategy guide. I bought this from a Nintendo 64 Forever forum member who goes by the name of Sick Cooper, who has a YouTube channel that he does videos on, and he sells on eBay under what is it? Rare Nintendo 64? Gosh, I hope I'm getting that right. Anyway, I bought this from him for a nice discount off of what a regular copy price would be, although this isn't a complete copy, because one of the things that this game, or this book, had with it, you see in the back here, the place where a poster was. But the reason why I bought it without the poster wasn't because of monetary issues, but because I own the poster. I owned this strategy guide back in the day and got rid of it like so many other things, like so many stupid things that I've done. But I kept the poster because I did have it on my wall when I lived in Montana back in like 1998, 99. And that poster is in my house somewhere. It's not that hard for me to go find it, but I just decided I didn't want to grab it. Maybe one of these days it'll end up on the wall behind me. And then one day, I believe it was last year, or maybe it was even earlier this year, I stumbled across this crazy little thing from, it's called Sandwich Islands Publishing Company, and it is the complete survival guide for Final Fantasy VII. I didn't know anything about this. All I can guess is that because of how big this game was and because of how big gaming was at the time, every little company that was out there must have decided they wanted to make a strategy guide for one of the biggest games of all time. So when I found that on eBay and it wasn't that expensive, I like snapped that shit up. Okay, so now we're going to depart from Final Fantasy VII. This is the official Brady Games strategy guide for Final Fantasy VIII. Because I don't think that Square did any more official guides on their own like they did for 7. They passed it on to Brady Games apparently. And here's the strategy guide for Final Fantasy IX. I love this thing down here at the bottom, playonline.com. You know, this being like 2000 and the internet was still pretty, you know, like in its infant stages as far as mass online goes. At least for me it was. I'd only had the internet for a year and a half by 2000. But it was amazing how they were already implementing stuff into these games back on the PlayStation 1. Here's my Final Fantasy Anthology Strategy Guide. The strategy guides for both Final Fantasies 5 and 6 within. Here's the Final Fantasy Chronicles Strategy Guide. I don't really know which side is the front because this is Chrono Trigger and it's got a UPC on it. You go to the other side, you got Final Fantasy 6 and it's got a UPC on it. So I guess there really isn't an official front or back. But pretty handy, these books, for those older games that I don't know that much about. And we jump to a strategy guide for Final Fantasy X from Brady Games. And then, of course, Final Fantasy X-2, also the Brady Games. I don't know that I would go and find every last strategy guide for all the other Final Fantasy games. Probably pretty much just for 7. And then I have this really cool Final Fantasy XII strategy guide. This is a, does it even say on here? Yeah, it's the limited edition guide. And this is how it works. You flip open this little flap, and then you open up, you open up the front of the book. And I guess I didn't really get to show that as well as I wanted to. But inside of that, this is like the cover of the book. And there's your pages and whatnot of the strategy guide. But also inside of here was this book, which there's the cover of it. Not sure how well that'll look, but it's very, very nicely done artwork. And then that's basically what you've got here is an art book on the inside, showing off like character designs and whatnot from the game. I can't really show that as well as I would like to because it's really hard for me to try to hold this stuff and you know, show it off to the camera here. And then last but not least in the strategy guides is my HD remaster strategy guide for 10 and 10.2. I had to get this along with that release as well, even though I've got strategy guides for the individual releases. Posterity's sake, people. Gosh. Okay, one last little stack of stuff to show before I wrap up this first video. These are essentially non-gaming related items. First of all, I'm going to show off, this is the Blu-ray for Final Fantasy The Spirits Within. Square decided to do movies. Well, they decided to do a movie to capitalize on the success of the Final Fantasy games. So they released this, all CG, voice acted and all that kind of stuff. I think I've watched this once. I think I had owned it on DVD or borrowed it or rented it or something on DVD. I remember thinking to myself, this was nice, but you could have taken Final Fantasy off of it, because this was like a sci-fi movie, straight up sci-fi movie. It didn't really have any of the fantasy type aspects to it that Final Fantasy is really known for. So it could have just been any CG sci-fi movie and not had the name Final Fantasy on it. But where they came through, in my opinion, on Final Fantasy movie is this baby right here. Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. This is the complete version because of some of the extra stuff that's in the special features. But two things to say about this. One, official sequel to Final Fantasy VII. This is the continuation of the actual story from Final Fantasy VII. And it's amazing. That's the other thing to say. It's beautiful. Some of the best CG I've ever seen at the time that it came out, which was... This Blu-ray came out in 2009. The movie is, I'd say, more like 2004-ish. But even now, 10 years later, this still blows a lot of stuff away that you'll see nowadays. And like I said, it continues the story of like 5 years or something like that past the ending of the game itself. It's just amazing. Watching Cloud and Sephiroth battle in the sky like that. The music, nothing gets my pulse pounding more than some of the music from in this movie, but also from the game, but I'll save that for my discussion about the game. Oh wait, maybe I'll talk about it right now. Not really, but this is the soundtrack for Final Fantasy VII. This is the original soundtrack with 4 discs. I'm not even sure if they're in here. They better be in here. Yeah, they're in here. Anyway, there's discs 1 and 2. And discs 3 and 4. This is essentially all the pieces of music from the game Final Fantasy VII. Every track from the game reproduced exactly as it was in there. And this is Japanese because this is the booklet that came in it, which has lots of great artwork in it. But then you get a page like this. This is the track listing, and it's all Japanese. But when you pop it in your computer like I did, and you rip it to your computer like I did, you see all the track titles and stuff as they are supposed to be. Well, okay, I'm sounding very Anglo-centric here. It's as it would be in English. I don't want to get anybody mad at me for that. If it's obviously role-playing games originated, this video game role-playing games pretty much originated in Japan. There may have been some back in the US, but I mean, we're talking about stuff that spun off of Dungeons and Dragons, basically. What I like from all of this, from Japanese stuff, is their very interesting takes on some of those fantasy concepts. So anyway, it's Japanese, but I just wanted to be able to read the titles of the songs on my MP3 player. I'm actually running out of battery life, which is really disappointing because it means I'll probably have to charge my camera for a little while before I can finish this series up. But I can try to finish this video up with 2 last things, and these are demo discs. This is a PC demo disc here that, as you can see, has Final Fantasy VII playable demo, Daikatana, Commandos, what else do we have in here? Thief, Dominion, and Tomb Raider 2 on this little demo disc. This is sort of an unofficial addition to my collection, which is Final Fantasy VII demo disc. So this is one I've had since back in the 90s. This was something that I bought 2 years ago or something. This is like an official, I guess I would say this is an official PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy VII demo disc that also includes, I'll read this first, playable demos of Final Fantasy VII and Bushido Blade, and video clips of Final Fantasy Tactics and Saga Frontier. There's what's on the back there. This was relatively inexpensive, and I was like, I'm going to get it. And I'm pretty sure there's a couple other instances of Final Fantasy VII as a demo. So I'm definitely going to try to track those down someday. Alright, so that's going to wrap up part 1 of this series. That'll save part 2 for me to just talk about Final Fantasy VII and how much I love it, how much it's affected me over the years, its place amongst all of my favorite things, just all that kind of stuff. So thanks a lot for watching. One more video to go, and I'll have this series wrapped up. So thanks a lot once again for sticking with me through all of this and listening to me ramble, and I'll see you in that last video. I said that last time, didn't I?